Hi, and welcome to another pottery tutorial video. This is Steve McDonald, and this video is going to be a little bit different than my typical videos because I'm going to be going through a summary of the tips and tricks that are included in my Amazon Kindle book called The Despicable 5: 5 Infuriating Beginning Pottery Problems and Their Solutions. So I'm going to give you a summary of what those 5 despicable problems are, and then I'm going to go through the first couple in a little bit more detail and just share those tips with you to hopefully get you moving along. And I will leave a link in the description below, and if you're interested in checking out the book, I think you'll find it very fun and helpful. So first, a summary of the Despicable 5. Despicable number 1 is the centering death wobble. And that's where your pot will not get centered no matter how hard you try. We're going to talk about that one in more detail in a minute. Despicable number 2 is an ugly bottom. This is a problem that many of us have in life as well as in pottery. And while I can't help you get a better looking bottom in life, I can help you do that in pottery. Despicable number 3 is pinching through the walls when you're trying to pull them up. Despicable number 4 is cracks in the bottom of your pot that of course don't appear until later. And then despicable number 5 is wobbly walls. This is a very common problem that a lot of beginners have, and there are a few things you can do to fix it. The book also has a link to my pottery website, which has tutorials and videos and step-by-step how-to everything that you could possibly imagine wanting to learn about pottery. But without further ado, let's dive into despicable number 1, the centering death wobble. So when you feel like your body is being bounced around, I have 2 solutions for you that will help you get rid of the death wobble. And you'll notice if you check out the book, it's a very short book because the answers to these problems are very short. They're very simple. It's just that a lot of people don't exactly know what the right answers are. But I've been teaching pottery for 25 years now, and I've seen it all. I've seen every problem almost. I haven't been surprised by a problem in about 15 years when it came to beginners doing pottery. So, solution number 1 to preventing death wobble is check the wetness of your clay. Beginners particularly will often be using clay that maybe has been sitting around for a long time, or maybe the bag hasn't been sealed very well and it's too dry. If you can't very easily push your thumb into the ball of clay, it's probably too dry. And in fact, even if it's not too dry, it's always best as a beginner to err on the side of softer clay. As you get more experienced, you might want it to be a little more firm or stiff so that you can bring your pot up taller when you're making 10 and 15-inch vases and whatnot. But when you're a beginner, you really need soft clay to get started, to not break all of your bones and muscles trying to get the darn thing centered. So check your clay. If it's too dry or too hard, get a new bag. Worst case scenario, if you can't come by a new bag, add some water to the bag, seal it back up, and let it sit for a week. You can even wrap your clay in a very wet towel, like a dish towel, wrap it around, and then seal it back up in the bag, and that will help distribute more water into there. And then you have to let it sit for a while. Best case scenario, if you're able to, run down to the clay store or order some more clay online, have it shipped, and start off with a fresh, soft bag of clay. So that's tip number 1, or solution number 1. Solution number 2 is your body position. So if you have good soft clay and you're still struggling with the death wobble, take a look at your body position. And as I'm teaching, I talk about body position constantly because it is the key to throwing successfully and centering successfully. But it doesn't end just at centering. It continues as you start to pull up your walls, as you start to open your form, as you start to shape your form. You always want to have good body position. And that means you're very close to the wheel with your legs like straddled right around it, like you're really good friends with that thing. It means your head is over the clay. It means that your elbows are tucked in at your side and they're tucked tight against your body or even into your hip socket if you can manage that. It depends. Everybody's arms and torsos and bodies are different shapes and lengths, but if you can tuck your elbows in like that, then you have that support. And instead of using your muscles, you're pushing out of your body. You're using the weight of your body and the strength of your skeletal system instead of your muscles. Okay, and then you also want to keep your hands connected, pressing your wrists or your thumbs together so that they're working together. And it gives you that solid triangle of support from your hands to your elbows and across your body. The triangle, of course, mathematically is one of the most stable structures that we know of, which is why it's used in so many things. And the same thing applies to pottery. And as a side note, one of the things I'm always telling my students, which seems counterintuitive, because everyone comes in wanting to be an artist, and I tell them, in order to be a good potter, you have to not think so much like an artist, but think like a robot or a machine. And the reason is because it's all about getting that structure of your body right. It's all about moving your body slowly and methodically and stably. If you get your hands braced well, if you move slowly and steadily, then the clay will really respond to you and make your throwing more effective and successful. If you're kind of moving around and wiggling around and not supporting your body, then the clay is going to show you who's boss, and you will have permanent death wobble as you try to center. Okay, and now let's talk about Despicable number 2, which is an ugly bottom. Let's talk about what makes your bottom ugly. One reason is that you make the bottom too thin. That means you're pushing too deep into your clay and you don't leave enough to have a substantial bottom. And it also tends to wrinkle and crack and do a lot of things when it's too thin. The other one is that you get like a little volcano forming in the bottom while you're throwing. So you get this little bump coming up, right? So let's talk about solutions for when it's too thin. The trick is to use a clay needle to measure the thickness of your pottery. So when you've created the bottom and you think it's okay, maybe it's a little on the thick side. That's a good way to err on the thick side because you can always make it thinner, but it's hard to make it thicker. But you've got it about where you think it might be, but you're not sure. You dry all the water out of the bottom with a sponge. You take your needle tool. You slide the needle tool you just poke it right down into the bottom of your pot until it hits the metal wheel head. And then you slide your finger, and this is the important part, your index finger. You slide it down the side of the needle until you touch the top of the clay, the top of the base of your clay. And then you hold your finger in place because that's your marker. That's telling you where the clay is or how thick the clay is on the bottom of your piece. And then you pull the needle out, holding your finger in place, and you look at how much needle was inserted into the clay. And it should be about 1 centimeter thick. If it's a lot more than that, then you want to thin it some more. If it's a lot less than that, then you might have gone too thin. A little less, a little thinner is okay, but too thin and you won't have much of a pot once you cut the bottom off. Okay, so that's how you measure. Let's talk about fixing the volcano in your bottom. Now that sounded completely wrong, but what you need to do is as you're pulling, the reason this usually happens is because as you're pulling up the walls, you accidentally push down on the base at the bottom of the wall with your fingers on the inside of the pot, and that tends to push a hole or a trough, kind of like a moat around your castle in the bottom of your pot. And so what you have to really be careful to do is when you go to pull up your walls, think about those fingers on the inside of your pot and just let them kind of hover there and be soft and just supportive, not push down. Most of that work is going to come from the outside anyway, because you always want to be pulling up and inward to create a cone shape with your walls, because you can always stretch them out, but they're much harder to push back in. Just be gentle with those fingers inside as you pull up the walls, and you won't create that trough and that volcano. Okay, so that's all I'm going to cover for this video. That'll help you to get centered. If you want to learn more, like how to not pinch through your walls and how to avoid cracks and things in your pots, then check out the book. It's on Amazon, and there's a link in the description that you can check out. And thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in another pottery video.